OCR or Optical Character Recognition was quite a fancy piece of technology when it came out many years ago. It was a costly solution that was limited to high end softwares or limited use cases. But today, both you and me can build custom OCR solutions using Google tools for any of your enterprise use cases. Hi, my name is Guna, and in today's video, we'll be looking at how we can build an OCR application using Google App Sheet that can read information from bills and invoices and automatically update the data in Google Sheets. And all this can be done within 1 hour. Before I proceed, let me just quickly show you an example of what I meant. So, what you're looking at here now is a typical utility bill from my country, and I want to collect some particular information and then automatically update it in my Google Sheets tracking, which is going to track my monthly utility bills. So in this case, I want to collect the account number, I want to collect the usage, kilowatt hours, and then the cost of the bill, and then the billing period. So how it works is I have my app sheet application that has been built, and in this case, you're looking at it from the desktop view. This can be in mobile version as well. So all I have to do is I have to upload the utility bill, and then it's going to automatically save the information and then get the relevant information from the bill directly. So in this case, you can see it has captured the account number, the usage kilowatt hour, the cost, and the billing period. So we can just quickly double check it. So the account number is this 21005692100569. Yeah, is that. And then the usage is 2169. The usage kilowatt is 2169, and the bill cost is 1108. The cost is 1108, and then the billing period is from 11/09/2020 to 11/10/2020. So it's from 11/09. So you see how it works, right? So this is the idea of OCR application where you can capture custom information for any of the use cases. And in this case, it's just for particular information, but you can imagine it can be like 100 information if you want to, right? So before looking at the details, let's try to understand the concept on how this works. We have the utility bills or invoices, and this is either in PDF or image format. And then we'll be using Google's App Sheet as the front end or application to collect or upload this information, and then it is sent to Google Cloud Platform's Cloud Vision API function, which is the OCR that takes the text file, the text information, and this will be then used to fill up the relevant fields in Google Sheets. So obviously you can see that we will be using Google Cloud platforms and different applications, and all this is connected using AppScript, which is a low-code JavaScript platform. And in this case, I don't know how to code, so that's where Gemini was used to come up with the code that is needed to execute this entire function. And the tools and functions we'll be using in this case, the front end is Google's AppSheet. The backend database is Google Sheets, which is then stored in Google Drive. And then the OCR engine is Cloud Vision AI, and the automation is done using AppScript. Now let's look at the steps that are needed to get this done. It's in three phases: phase one, phase two, and phase three. The phase one is the back end and the front end setting up. So in this case, we'll be creating a simple folder in Google Drive, and then inside the folder, we'll be creating a Google Sheets file, which will have the so-called schema or the database format. And then from here, we'll be using Google's App Sheet to create the front end for this application. And then once this is done, we'll be setting up the OCR engine, which is part of Google Cloud Platform. So obviously for this, you need to have your Google Cloud project ready with your billing enabled. And then we'll be enabling two APIs in this case. The critical one is the Google Cloud Vision API, which is the OCR engine, and then of course Google Drive API if it's not enabled in your case. And then we'll be using the Google's API key, which will then be fed into our app script. So this happens in the third phase where we'll be setting up the automation. So the concept here is, since I don't know how to code, I had to use Google Gemini to come up with the code. So this is the vibe coding part of this entire concept, right? And with the code, we'll get a code and then we'll configure or we'll paste the code in F script. In this case, it's 100% whatever that is generated by Gemini is copy and paste, and then the API and all other details comes into this part. And then after that, this code is linked to the Google App Sheet. So this app sheet is the one that calls this code and then it executes the entire function. So these are the steps which are needed to execute this function. So now let's look at step number 1. Phase 1, step 1, create the folder. Step 2, create the sheets file. And then in the sheets file, you should have figured out what sort of information that you want to collect, and then whatever reference or necessary supporting information. So in this case, it's going to be standard. There's a row ID, and then the capture timestamp, which will be updated automatically in AppSheet later. And then the build image is where when you upload the image, it has to have a URL that is going to be captured, and then it's going to be sent to Google Cloud Functions to process the image. So we're going to have a reference for the image, and in this case, the reference is the URL of where it's being stored. And in our case, obviously, it's going to be stored in this particular folder that we created. Whatever image that you upload is going to be going inside here. Okay, so this has a URL, and this URL is what is going to be updated here. Okay, and then status is going to be processing and processed, or if there's an error, it's going to be error. So this will be configured in app script part, not the app sheet part. Okay, and then obviously these are the information that will be captured from this particular image. So in this case, it's 4, it can be 5, it can be 10, it can be 100, whatever that is necessary for your use case. Okay, and from here we can quite easily create the app sheet interface by going to extensions, clicking on app sheet, and then create an app. Okay, for this video, the scope is not about the concepts on app script or app sheet. So refer to my earlier videos on that. So I'm just going to go through the details on like what is needed in this particular use case, right? So once you go to app sheet, obviously you'll get whatever this data schema will be updated here. So we just need to ensure that this data schema is in the right format. So it's number for the row number, row ID is text, correct? And then for the capture timestamp, this is going to be automatic. So the value is going to be now, which will automatically capture the current time and date. And then of course for the row ID is going to be unique ID formula as well. And then for the build image, this is going to be an image that we capture, right? So it has to be the image format where we can upload the image. Okay, and then the status is going to be updated automatically by app script function or code. And this, okay, so these are the 4 information that will be captured from the OCR and then updated automatically. So in this case, it can all be text or because it's all captured and then updated, right? So it can all be text if needed, but in this case I'm just going to put text and number, price, whatever, so that we can add formulas here later if needed, right? But in this case it all can be text if needed. And okay, yeah, for all this I also want to keep it in a way that you can edit the information. So let's say the OCR captures the data, and then you can view the data. If it's not correct, then you can update the information directly, right? So because of that, I want to keep this as all editable, and then for the status is non-editable. Okay, so this is about it for the app sheet schema. And then for the views, I'm going to have one form view to input the data, and then there's going to be another view where it's going to be showing the summary of the information. So this is in a DAC format. So technically, that's about it for the app sheet part, where we can now download this application. Okay, you can download this application in your telephone, or in this case, it's going to be I'm just going to use it in my desktop. Okay, so this is how it looks, and this is the desktop view. Obviously in mobile it will look better. So this has all the summary information, and if let's say the OCR captures the information, and if it's in the wrong, I mean, if it's wrong, you can edit the information, right? So that's the point of editing. So this is the F sheet part. You can see that if you want to add new information or new bill, you can just click on this, and then you can just upload the image. Okay, and then it will automatically capture this information, right? So that's about it for this app sheet part. Phase 1 done, and for phase 2 we'll see how we can set up the OCR engine. The scope of this video is not to look at the fundamentals on how you can set up the Google Cloud project, etc. So this has to be done earlier, assuming you've done this. So there are lots of YouTube resources available, or you can also refer to my earlier videos on this step-by-step process on how you can enable the project. And the important part is this one. There's two APIs that are critical to run this. The first one is the Cloud Vision API, which you have to enable manually in most cases. And in some cases, if your Google Drive API is not enabled, you also have to enable that for this particular project you select. And then you'll obviously get the API key, which will then be used to link your Google Cloud with your app script. So the APIs. Okay, so this is the Cloud Vision API that we have to enable. And probably it's worth highlighting that Google actually has quite a number of vision AI models or vision AI engines. And in this case, we're using the probably the most basic one or the cheapest one, Cloud Vision API. They also actually have quite advanced sort of models which can read information from standard documents like this document AI and all that. But this is actually significantly more expensive. And unless your use case is quite advanced, you can consider this. But in our case, it's very straightforward. And the cost for this is also very, very cheap. If you look at it, how it works is like each upload is considered as one unit. So if you got like 1,000 units, it's free. And after that, it's like for the next 1,000 unit to 5 million units, it's just $1.50 4,000 units. So the cost, even if you use it like a few thousand documents every month, is going to be like few dollars. It's almost negligible. So once you enable these APIs and then you get your API key, okay, and then this key will then be used in your app script. Now let's look at the last phase, phase 3, how to set up the automation. This is probably the most complicated but also the most interesting part, because this is where we can kind of play with Google Gemini to do white coding. Since in my case I didn't know how to code, so I used Gemini to come up with the entire code stack. And if you have not experience in coding as well, you can use the exact same method. So once we do this, we will get a code stack in JavaScript, which can then be copied and then pasted in Google App Script. We will create a standalone App Script project, and then we'll paste this code, and then also we'll put the API keys and then the sheet details here so that this can be linked together. And then the last step is going to be we will link this code into app sheet by using automation bot. So before going into the details, let's try to understand the overall logic here, the flow of this whole system or the idea. Okay, so the first step is app sheet is the app. Okay, this can be either in your mobile phone or desktop application. So you can capture the document, and this document gets saved as a JPEG format, as an image file. Okay, and then at the same time, the basic data gets registered in sheets, and this is done by app sheet itself, not app script. Okay, so the information that is get saved is row ID, timestamp, and the image URL. So this is the sheets file earlier. So the moment you take a picture, row ID gets created, and the timestamp gets created, and then the image URL gets saved here as well, because this is the part where it's done in AppSheet itself. Okay, and then once this gets done, it triggers an automation in AppScript. Okay, so this is where app sorry I was wrong. This triggers an automation in AppSheet, which then calls the AppScript function. Okay, so what this app script receives is the row ID. So this row ID was created by app sheet, and then app script receives this row ID so that it knows whatever data that is supposed to be using at this point of usage is for this particular row. Okay. In app script, there's two major functions. Okay. One is start the OCR process, which receives the row ID as an input. So what it does is it looks for the particular relevant row, and then it sets this particular column as processing, right? So that means it's work in progress. Okay, and then it triggers the next function, which is processing the bill. Okay, so this receives, or this takes the image part, this takes the uh, so the row ID, and then of course the sheet details, and then it passes to Google's the OCR engine. Okay, so the OCR engine in this case is Google's Cloud Vision API. So it receives the parameters that is needed to process the OCR. Okay, and then it outputs a JSON file or text format output. Okay, so this actually gets back to AppScript. So in this case, what happens is, let's say if you send this entire file as a reference, right? Okay, what it does is it extracts all the data, all the text that is available, that is able to be extracted, will be extracted, and then it will be sent to AppScript as a JSON format. Okay, and then in AppScript, back again where we will process and we'll identify the files or the text that we need for our use case. So we need this four logic. Sorry, we need these four items, and we will have the code to identify that four items from that entire stack of text. Okay, and then finally these four parameters are collected, and then they are populated in Google Sheets according to the same row ID that was given to it earlier. So this is the overall logic or the flow. Okay, so in your case, what can you do, right? uh, I'm assuming, like, if you're watching this, most likely you might be also quite similar to me, not familiar with JavaScript coding. So you can use the exact same method. You can write code with Gemini to come up with the code that is needed for this to work. Okay. So in order for you to do that, okay, I have provided two items for you. Okay. If you look at the description, you can find the prompt sample and then the code sample. Okay. The link to that will be there. Okay. So what the prompt sample is, you can copy this entire prompt and then you can put in Gemini to work on it to create the code that is needed. Okay. And before that, you also need a sample document that you want to use for your for your OCR. So for example, if it's your utility bill, what you can do is take one particular sample and then you can also give it to Gemini, saying that, you know what, this is the sample document and this is the information that I want to extract. Okay, so how do you do that? Step one, you identify all the data that is needed. Okay, so in this case, if you look at it, these four columns will can remain as it is. I mean, it can be changed if you want to, but for simplicity, you can leave it as it is. So row ID is going to be there, the timestamp is going to be there, and the build image URL will be there, and the status is going to be there. Okay, and then you identify all the parameters that you want to collect. Okay, in this case, it's four, but maybe you want to add more. You want to add the address, or you want to add the label of the utility company as well. Okay, so once you identify all the data that is needed, okay, and then you can create this Google Sheets file in your Google Drive, and then you can create the app interface. Okay, so that you can just use the app to take the image like how we saw just now earlier in the example. Okay, so once you do this, the next step is you create your Google Cloud project, you enable the APIs that was mentioned earlier, and then you get the API key. So this is the Google Cloud part, okay, which we saw in phase 2. Okay, and this is the phase 1 is where you create the app. Okay, so once you do these two, what you can do is you can copy this prompt and then you can modify or change this particular information as needed, right? So just now, if you look at this example, 1 2 3 4, I would assume you can leave it as default, but this is what you're going to change, right? So these four parameters. So these four parameters are column E, F, G, H. So you can either rename it or you can have additional columns added as well. So H maybe I, J, K. Okay, as per your requirement. Okay, input this prompt in Gemini and then you revise it as you need it to be, and then you can ask it to come up with the app script code. Right? It's already mentioned here that, okay, the prompt here already mentions that, okay, please write a standalone script. Okay, so once you kind of paste this, you revise this, and then you can tell it to, you know what, my parameters are quite different from this. Please revise the details as necessary. Okay, and then once you do that, you will get the code. And then you can also, once you get the code, what you can do is you can also provide uh, your sample document. You can upload it as an image file, and then you say this is the sample document, I want you to extract this particular information, and then you can kind of list out that information. Like for example, if you want, um, let's say the address, right? Okay, so you say this is the address, I want you to extract this address, and this is the address as per in the bill. So it knows that, okay, you're talking about this particular item here. So once you do that, it's going to update the code to reflect whatever requirement that you specifically say. Okay, so I hope you get the idea, right? Okay, we have this prompt as a sample prompt which you need, and this prompt actually has the concept, like this entire concept is there. Okay, what you need to do is you need to play with it so that this particular parameters that is different for your use case is captured accordingly. Okay, So once you do that, you will get a code, and then for step number 5, you can copy this code and then you can create a standalone app script project. And then you go to your app script application, you can create a new project, you can name it, you delete this, okay, and then you just paste the code, right? So once you paste the code, you save the code, and then in this case you are not required to create any triggers because this code get called by app sheet separately, right? So you don't need to set any triggers. So the moment you create, you name it, and then of course you have to, in your code, okay, obviously you have to update this relevant information according to your own use case, right? Okay, so the spreadsheet ID is going to be from your spreadsheet. You need to look for this particular information. After the D slash is this up to before edit, right? So you copy this, you paste it here, okay, and then you also paste your API key and then the sheet name, which is your tab name. Okay, so once you do that, this part of the app script is done. You can save the project, it's ready to run, right? So it's going to sit there ready to be called by your app sheet. Okay, so next what you do is you create an app sheet automation bot that calls this particular app script when this data is uploaded. Okay, so this is an sort of automation bot that you create in app sheet. So how do you do that is, okay, if you go to your app sheet, you go to this part, automation, you click on that, okay, and then you create. So how it works is you create a new automation, okay, you create a new bot, okay, and then you configure the event. So when you configure the event, it's going to be, let's say, trigger. Okay, I'm just going to do some sample one. Okay, and then this trigger is only this, nothing else you're going to change, right? So the table is that particular table. So when you add the data, this automation bot gets triggered. Okay, and then the next step is where you have to create, or where to call the function, call OCR script. Okay, so this part is where what you do is, this is custom task as it is, you select call a script, okay, and then you choose your app script project, right? So whatever project that you created, the moment you click on this, since it's the same account, it will be detected. So you click on that. Okay, when the first time you click, okay, let me just show you another example. So the first time you click, you have to, usually you have to authorize the script. So whatever steps that is pops up here, you just allow, enable the authorization, etc. Okay, so once you do that, okay, let me just show you my own original script. Okay, so once you select the script, once you authorize it, okay, what you gotta do is you gotta choose the function that is gonna run. So in this case, it's the first function that we talked about here, right? Earlier in the S script, I said there's two main functions, right? So this is the default function. So you just let the default first function to run. So in F script, how it works is when you have many functions, right? Okay, it automatically detects all the key functions. Okay, so in this case, for this particular code, there's two major functions. Okay, so the first one is the start OCR process, and then the process build function. So this part, all you got to do is you select the default first function to run, right? Start the OCR process, you select that, and then you got to provide the input for this, which is the row ID. Okay, so this is the row ID that needs to go as an input to the app script, so that app script knows when it comes to this sheet which particular row is looking at, and then which particular bill image URL it needs to select on. Okay, so once you set this, you save, and then that's it. That's about it. So this automation is set. Okay, so just double confirm your data format is all correct. And I think if I'm not wrong, earlier I said that this you put this as non-editable, but technically it has to be editable. For the image, it has to be editable so that you can add the image. Okay, so you save, and then you can use the app. So you can copy the mobile install link, or you can just, to test it, you can use it in browser. You copy and then you paste. Okay, so it has a standard view, and then when you're going to add, you can edit. So let's see an example here again. This is the we're going to see another new row being created here. Okay, so let's upload the same image. Save. It's being processed. So you see it gets updated accordingly. Okay, so yeah, that's about it. That's the entire flow that we have seen just now. So that being said, what are the potential issues that we might be facing using this application? Okay, your image quality obviously makes all the difference. So if you take a photo and the image is not captured clearly, or if it's blur, obviously the data captured will be mistaken or wrong. Okay, so you got to ensure that, when you capture image, it's very clear, right? Okay, and then also, like I mentioned just now, this process, right, it has a lot of different applications, that's back and forth sort of communication. It's all Google apps, Google tools, but it's still different applications and different services, right? So because of that, okay, sometimes it tends to have issues with access, hierarchy, and chain of trust. So I mean, Google is kind of known for this. They have it for a good reason, because you want security, and safety is like a top priority for them, right? Okay, so in most cases, when I face issues, it's not because of the code or the technical part. It's always dealing with permission issues. Okay, so this is something that, if you're an enterprise, if you're trying it, then you need to make sure you talk to your administrator to give you all the necessary permissions that is needed, right? So yeah, that's about it. We saw how we can quite easily create an OCR application using Google App Sheet as the front end, and then Google Sheets and Drive as the back end. So yeah, happy trying. Thank you very much. See you guys in the next video.